Start the recording. So for those of you who are joining on Zoom, if you have questions for our speaker today, you can put them in the chat box, and then Barb will ask those questions at the end of the meeting. We'll start with questions from the room and then questions from those on Zoom. And we'll ask our speaker, Dr. Jose Leal, to repeat. Anybody in the room who has a question, we'll ask him to repeat the question so people on Zoom can hear what the question is. So, all right, so I'm very excited to have Dr. Jose Leal with us today, and I'm sure that most of you know him, but he is the curator and the science director of the Bailey Matthews National Shell Museum and Aquarium. He is the editor of the Nautilus, a scientific journal about shells. And he has been on like so many TV shows and movies that I'm losing count. Just say last year it was PBS on Changing Seas, Mollusks More Than a Shell. This year he's on the movie Sanibel that I just got off of Amazon. So he just keeps showing up on my TV every time he's getting very famous, very famous. So we're really fortunate to have him here with us today to tell us all about the new Great Hall of Shells at the Shell Museum. So thank you, Jose.
Thank you so much, Debbie. And yeah, as a matter of fact, I got a couple of offers from Hollywood, but I still like shells better. So, well, it's great to be here. Yeah, this is something that's very dear to my heart because of, the past couple of years, that's 3 years, we put a lot of effort into the program of redoing the Great Hall of Shells. So if I move here, can I? Oh yeah, there we go. So yeah, I'll be showing you some of the, I have the light down. Yeah, some of the. Thanks so much. That's much better. Some of the developments and how we got to where we are now. How many of you have been to the museum since we opened the whole Great Hall? Well, that's great. So a good number of you have seen what the entire remake. Here's a photo of the museum just maybe a couple of months after Hurricane Ian, when we started to dismantle the old Hall of Shells. The old Hall of Shells was first opened in July 1995 to the public, and it had at that point, it had a handful of exhibits, maybe 4 or 5 exhibits, and we, over the following many years, we added and added. And we added in such a way that it was not consistent. The exhibits were different from each other. The styles were different. Times were passing, time was passing, and things have changed. The design favorites were changing. So there was a mishmash of different styles involved. What you see next, what you see now in the museum, is a much more unified and much more consistent array of exhibits, all bearing the same style, the same fonts, the same colors, and it's really. So the Great Hall of Shells, and we welcome you to the Great Hall of Shells. The Great Hall is an expression that was used going back to the Renaissance in Europe. When the big castles, the big houses in Western Europe would have, great halls where they exhibit their art and all that. And that's the concept behind our Great Hall of Shells, to show and tell about shells. And the Great Hall is divided into in our manner of seeing things, and from the standpoint of workflow, designed into a let's see my pointer here, a central area and a perimeter area. The central area is what we call the beauty and diversity area of the Great Hall. And outside we have the educational exhibits with covering a very, very wide array of themes, as you'll see next. I want to show a couple of key players in the design and execution of the how as it is today. The main player in this all, in terms of design, was Sandra Wheeler, who directs Matter Architecture practice in New York City. She's an architect, and I think the fact that she's an architect had a lot to do with the, the looks and the great way that the museum looks now. I mean, the great hall looks now. She had a vision that to me was very impressive. And she could just basically close her eyes and say, well, I want to see it that way. And it's a great way and it's beautiful. And second, I want to introduce Raymond Rawls and Lorraine Burden. They're a couple based in Gainesville, and they run Rawls Arts and Design. And the Rawls and Burden, they made all the mounts that attach the shells to the cases. If you look carefully, each shell is attached to the wall by a wire frame. And each one of those wire frames was custom designed to accommodate that particular shell. Imagine that. You have around, I would say, anywhere between 1,200 and 1,500 shells in the Great Hall. And each one of them has its own mount. Just, handmade, hand painted. So it's a lot of work. They were also responsible for creating the dioramas that you see there. I'll show a couple of them next. I don't know if you can see that. That's a part of our process to work with all the many shells and objects that we wanted to have in the new Great Hall. We created checklists. Each exhibit had its own checklist. In the checklist, we have on the left-hand column here, we have what is it? Is it a photo? Is it a video? Is it a shell, an object, a book? So we made that note. The second column will have the dimensions of that object, the dimensions of that shell. So we had to measure each one. So the designer could know exactly what she had to do with in terms of area and volume. And then where was it? Do we have that? It's in hand, or do we have to acquire that? Do we have to borrow that from another museum? Here, an image of that object or shell or video or whatever. And on the right-hand side, a link to the actual high-definition image or a photo of the shell or the actual video. So this was the main source of control for designing and making sure that everything would fit, that all the spaces were appropriate to the size of the shell, the size of the book, the size of whatever. For the large shell exhibits, we worked from templates. I may have said that in a previous presentation to you here last year, but we did make actual size paper templates with the exact shape of the case that exhibit will be in. And then we proceeded to place the shells or objects or whatever we were doing, make sure that the sizes would fit. This is an example of one of the exhibits that's one of the horizontal quote-unquote tables in the center of the Great Hall, where we show the pairs of species that occur on each side of the eastern of the one. And there are the cases. So basically we installed, evidently we had to install all the cases before we could put the shells in it. And that's part of the workflow of the project. Here is a picture of yours truly playing with shells. What else can one do? Deploying the shells onto the paper templates to make sure that they were just so that sometimes I would have to replace a shell because the size was odd, was not really what we wanted, it wouldn't fit right. So that allowed us to have a pretty good grasp of what was going into each case. And as you know, there are many cases with shells. That's a a photo of the final result of that exhibit with the pairs of species that occur on both sides, Pacific and Atlantic, both sides of the Eastern of the Panama. So I'll show you now some pictures of the exhibits in the center, in an area that we call beauty and diversity, where we really went all the way out just to show without a lot of complication, just to show the beauty and diversity of particularly marine shells. That's a vision of that area. And we have cases with some of the most the favorite groups of collectible shells, beginning by the Burexes. We have terrier shells and cowries, scallops, volutes, an exhibit called Sculptors and Colors, where we celebrate sculptures and color shapes and in the different color patterns we see in marine shells, and Time and Evolution. And Time and Evolution is the exhibit that holds the more shells. It's about 76 different species, some of them with more than one specimen. Now, here's a photo where you can see the cowries ready to, the cowries are eager to go on to their food. They can't wait. And each one of them already has their own custom-made mouth. You can see the little black spikes. And in some cases, they were just, they were glued to the shells using a special museum archival quality glue that can be dissolved with water. So that when we decide to take the exhibit down and return the shells to the collection, most of them come from the actual collection of the museum. We can use water, and that adhesive will go away. Here is Lorraine doing, the first deployment with the shells ready to go into the Time and Evolution exhibit. You'll see that each one of those shells has a little number on next to it, and the number relates to a number with the name, the common name and the scientific name on a rail at the bottom. So that was a very difficult part. We have to make sure that everything matched. The numbers themselves were made here in Fort Myers at the IMAG, used to be called the Mary. The actual director of IMAG is the guy who really did that. He really likes to use that machine they have. It's a laser cutter, and he was very gracious in providing that. We'll be using a few more in one of the upcoming temporary exhibits at the Museum of Caribbean Seashell that's coming up. And here is another view of the final result, and very elegant. All the shells are set against a black background, and I'm very proud to say that I fought really hard with the designer to have black backgrounds, but she wanted to have a couple of different options, and I said, no, you have to have shells against black background. Because this black background makes them pop, but makes the colors really, jump out of the background. There is Lorraine looking at, I took advantage of the fact that it didn't have its PVC, plexiglass cover to take that picture, showing we have to make sure that all the shells were the same height so that things will look nice and even. We also have, as part of the central area there that we call the central tables that we call global distribution. We have a custom-made video showing the breakup of Pangea, the old continent that started breaking up 200 million years ago, and that gave origin to the current ocean that we know. And that's pretty cool. Make sure you take a peek when you go to the museum next. This is something we're still pondering. We're doing an experiment with a trawler where we want to show to the public how the shells are stored into the scientific collection. And we have one, and we try to make a decision of whether to keep that or not. Because it's kind of, the drawers are not working the way we want it, but next time you go, take a look, we do have a drawer. And those are actual collection specimens taken out of the collection drawers so the public can, can learn how we do that in the real world. I do have a video here that I did. It's a very interesting time lapse that I shot over a period of 20 days. Every day I took some pictures for a total of 220 pictures. It's a little video that lasts about 27 seconds. Can you hold one more time? So yeah, that's 27 seconds showing the work done in 20 days from May 1st through May 20th of 2024. So you can see how the cases were coming up. Sometimes they remove a case to the center, move them out, and now the shells are being deployed into the cases. Now the central case tables, the curved table. Most of the people you see there are Lorraine and Raymond, and that's the end of phase one. So now let's go to the entire hall. Let's visit the outer space beyond the central area, what we call phase two, that we just opened now last month. So this is a view. One of the things that's really cool when you go there, try to place yourself in the very center of the room. And then as you look around the perimeter, each one, there are like 8 openings. Actually, there are actually 7, because one of them is the entrance hall. But those 7 openings, each one of them has a diorama that can be seen from the center. This diorama you can see here is a diorama about the species that live on man-made structures, like wharves and docks for boats here in Southwest Florida. And there are other dioramas that you can see as you turn around and look. Exhibit here on Southwest Florida shelves that was kindly sponsored by Per Beckman and Philip Sharp. Thank you, Per. It is one of my favorite, evidently, because it's dealing with the local species. So we have an assortment of shells, large size, the medium to large. We have a lot of small things because people cannot really see them around. But we do have arrays of specimens of the same species showing growth series or variation within the same species. Like you see there, variation in the horse conch, including an albinistic shell. There we go. We also treat, this is the diorama on man-made structures with the species that you can find on oysters and mussels and all that. And in the background, we have examples of 6 different types of habitats that you can find here in Southwest Florida: mangroves, oyster reefs, mud flats, man-made structures, deeper water environments, and sandy beaches and sand flats. Each one with examples of the species you can find in these different habitats. Evidently there are species that can cross over, that can occupy more than one of the habitats, as you know. We have, the classic question we traditionally have from visitors: why do we have so many shells here? And we try to give the explanations and focusing mostly on the very wide extent of the continental shelf off West Florida that we have here, that provides growing ground and grounds for the growth of billions and billions of individuals of the different species that end up in our shores when we have storms and all that. We also created a map and that I really like. I think it's really cool, with favorite selling locations in Southwest Florida, from Boca Grande to Cape Romano. evidently including Sanibel and, your Ice Island, Canadian Island, and all those favorite spots that we all love so much. Cool exhibit celebrating shelling in the U.S. in Florida. And on the left-hand side there, we have on this half of the screen, we have a celebration of people who were really instrumental in fostering the knowledge of local species in Southwest Florida. Beginning by the picture of Bill Clench there on the top left-hand side, Bill was a curator at the Museum of Comparative Zoology at Harvard, who I wish I had known, I never met him. And Bill wrote the first article on Sanibel shells in the Nautilus, which now is the Museum Scientific Journal, back in 1927. So it's a list of local species, and it's pretty accurate for today's standards. And then in the center up there, Julia Rogers, who wrote the famous shell book in 1908. On top of the top right, Louise Perry, who was very connected to Sanibel. There is actually a Perry tract that's managed by SCCF. Oh, actually, King Island, I'm sorry. Here, just off West Boat Drive. And Louise wrote a very, very influential book on the seashell of Southwest Florida back in the late 40s. And then evidently we have our jolly founding director there, Dr. Abbott, and a selection of Julia Rogers' book here, Louise Perry's Shelf of Southwest Florida, and two of Tucker's most influential books, American Seashells and Seashells of the World. And in this image, we have a celebration of shelling on Sanibel, beginning by a picture up there of Granny Matthews, who actually gave the name, one of the names. And Granny Matthews, her name was Harriet, and she was the grandma of the baby brothers. And she was the one who created and hosted the first shell festival at her hotel that later became the island on western side. And then articles celebrating the hobby of shelling that was growing out in the 20th century, including the great article in National Geographic 1968, which was one of the pieces that really made it shelter. We have the exhibit that we brought back from, the content basically brought back from the old great hollow shells and land snails. And the land snail exhibit has something that's really dear to my heart too, which is this collection of Libius tree snails of 56 different color forms, many of which are now long extinct because of development, because of for different reasons, over collecting and such. So make sure to check it out. I mean, some of them are really gorgeous, like those. I mean, the colors in the Libius mind-boggling. We have a little section on the Polynepa. Polynepas are the painted snails from Cuba. And we have that little box, that little shadow box was actually in the old museum, the old Great Hall. And it was a gift from a famous Cuban malacologist, Dr. Carlos de la Torre. It was a gift from de la Torre to Bill Clench, who I just shown a picture of, back in the early 30s. So de la Torre made that case, putting the shells of cotton. And on the right here, we have 3 pages of de la Torre's old guide on the Polynepa species. A cool thing with that is just a little inside notes there is that we actually conserved that shadow box because it was an old cotton, it was yellow, and it was kind of breaking off. I mean, imagine this is from almost 100 years old. And we had Raymond and Lorraine redo the whole thing using polyfiber, which is a artificial cotton that doesn't have the shells. We have a Leal snail diorama that's really cool, and I have little red arrows showing where the shells are, and it's kind of cool if you go there, try to find all of them. There are probably 4 or 5. Some of them are very well hidden, so it's a nice little challenge. We talk about the giant African snail, which is an invasive species that's caused a lot of harm to plants. And it's an animal it's unstoppable. Once it gets somewhere, it's very hard to control. They can eat turtle, they can eat paint, and they carry a parasitic worm that can, cause a kind of encephalitis. So it's a species we do not want to see here. But we talk about it to raise the awareness for that species. We brought back the mangrove diorama. It's actually the mangrove diorama was the only section of the old Great Hall that we never moved out. At some point, if you went to the museum a year and a half ago, you saw the Great Hall completely empty. With a little mangrove diorama, under wraps, so you wouldn't get dusty. But it was really well done to begin with. We added a little section with plexiglass to simulate seawater. And we have species that you normally would find in the mangrove environment, around the mangrove environment, like crown conchs and sometimes forest conchs and all that. And we also preserved our raccoon. We kept the raccoon, and that raccoon is really a real, it's taxidermy at its best, and it belongs to the Florida Museum of Natural History. We wouldn't do that today, but it's been done. So we kind of take advantage of that and include that raccoon. We include that raccoon as a denizen of mangroves. We love the mangrove crab, and it's a big hit. It's 2 children for the great art. Florida fossils. We have a section where we show it also from the old Great Hall. We knew that it was a favorite of the visitors, so we kept the Florida fossils in different formats. And in particular, the pairs of pairs of the fossil and in the recent version, the living one versus the fossil, the closest relatives. We also kept the old fossil column, which includes 4 different Florida formations, fossil formations in Florida. And we actually ensure that each one of those 4 blocks, and they are styrofoam blocks to begin with, that each one of them they will have only the species that are actually from that formation. So it's pretty cool. We have the extreme section, including deep sea mollusks. We have the extreme section, including as one of the extremes, in our vision, the world record size shells. The original exhibit, the world record size shells, was donated by the Sanibel-Captiva Shell Club. So we wanted to keep that legacy alive, so we kept that exhibit too. And showing 2 species that of that, we have about nine species in the record exhibit. On the left, the Goliath conch. In the center, the Atlantic trumpet triton, and on the right, we have the West Indian check that was donated to the museum by Mr. Donald Dan, who's sitting all the way back there. Thank you, Donald. And last but not least, the world record horse conch, which is the largest shell ever found in the Atlantic Ocean. It's the record of the largest shell in our ocean. So 24 inches, about 50. The deep sea mollusks exhibit with some deep sea mussels and clams from hydrothermal vents in the ocean or something. Some of them between 4,000 and 5,000 meters, which is about 12,000, 15,000 feet deep. The very cool rendition of the micromollusk exhibit in which we we illustrate some of the local micromollusks, but we also have a little microscope with a turnstile that will, there's the microscope, and the microscope projects into a little screen so you can see the shell, especially useful for children, little children. And whoops. And we also play the video that we played in our own micromollusks, so it could salvage that and give a totally new shape to the exhibit. Well, Sailor Valentine, we expanded on the old Sailor Valentine's exhibit to include a couple of very cool new things. One of them is a Valentine from the 1820s that was sent to the museum under my care way back maybe a couple of years ago. And it came with all the provenance. It was a captain that brought it from Barbados back at that time. And it has all the history, his handwriting, and then letters from the family and all that. So it's pretty cool. The oldest Valentine we have. We kept the old one from the 1850s. I think the one home again. With little phrase, home again. And one donated by David Wise, who is a champion exhibitor here at the Sanibel Shell Show, Artistic Division. And the large one donated by Hatsui Imura from Japan. He sent that, I made an inquiry to see if she was interested in doing that. Right away, she was on board, and she started making it. And she made it as a tribute to, the renovation of the island after Hurricane Ian. So it was a very nice gesture. She sent that by airplane and imagine how much it cost to ship that from Japan. And a couple of shells came dislodged. And I took pictures and sent to her by email, and she said, "No worries, I'm going to the shell show next year, and I'll fix it." So she came to the museum with her students and her glue gun, and lo and behold, it was done. And there it is. It's a wind rose north, south, east, west, and it's really spectacular. And we have a little more in the historical, cultural realm. We also kept the concept of having an exhibit about the community, which we argue we can sell people from this area. We didn't keep the mannequins we had, which now have a new home. But we do exhibit the artifacts that are on loan, on permanent loan to the Shell Museum from the Florida Museum in Mexico. We have about 45 objects, artifacts, ornaments, tools, and all that. And we have some replicas that are there to be touched from the visiting public. So that case is open and people can touch them. In 2021, we received a gift from a colleague, Dr. Jim Cohn, who was the secretary of the president of Sierra Club in California. And at some point, he moved to the Florida Keys and bought a small resort. And at some point, he decided to sell it. Actually, after Hurricane Irma that destroyed that whole area, sugar loaf tea. And he had that sculpture, and he mailed me and said, "Are you guys interested in that?" I said, "Well, why not?" And it's a very interesting sculpture that depicts the Haida legend of human creation. And according to the Haida people of the Pacific Northwest, humans came about when a raven was hungry and wanted to eat a big clam. So the raven opened the clam. This is one valve of the clam. That's another one. That's the raven. And inside the clam were people. So that's how we came about. And that's the version of legal life. We have exhibits on the decorative arts, lots of very cool objects made of nautilus shells and such. And of particular interest to me is this it doesn't show well, but it's the cameo that was donated by, it's a helmet that was donated to Cecilia by Cecilia Abbott, who was a Turkish widow. And before she passed away, she donated a couple of objects to the museum, including that beautiful chest of drawers with mother of pearl inlays, and that cameo that we lit from inside, and it's really spectacular. Uh, some more objects, adornments, necklaces, and the headpiece made of cowrie shells. This exhibit, it's basically a tribute to a good friend of many of you here, Joyce Matthews, who had created, and she grew to have a very strong interest in the dishes, the silk made of dishes from the noble pen shell from the Mediterranean Sea. And she started actually doing her own sea silk, weaving sea silk from local species of pen shells, from the local pen shells. And she created a couple of objects that are in the exhibit, and donated her magnificent noble pen shell that's there now, and talks about the spinning process and all that. So thank you, Joyce. I'm sorry you're not here today, but hopefully we'll give you soon. We'll have a session at the end that treats the perils that mollusks and the environment in general are under now. Including introduction of invasive species. This one you can see very well, but it deals with the zebra mussel invasive species, the Great Lakes. We show a map of the distribution of zebra mussel, and the Raymond Rawls made this very, very nice depiction of a propeller of a freshwater boat, a boat from the Great Lakes, that's covered with zebra mussels. That is, they are not real. Each one of those shells is handmade. And it's based on an actual photo that we found online. And we showed the photo to Raymond and said, oh, I can do that. So he bought a propeller and created all the artificial shells on top of it. Just to raise the awareness that we made this. When we talk about the problem of Hawaiian land snails, most of them are now extinct because of the introduction of the rosy wolf snail that basically ate all of them. We talk about climate change, and those last panels on climate change and ocean acidification and those problems were actually contents that we created for a temporary exhibit in the museum that was to be up slightly prior to, not prior. We are creating that just before the hurricane to be installed in January of 2023, and the hurricane put that all to rest. So, but we had all the content. We have the content fact checked. We have the design. So we said, well, let's use that in the debate. And there it is. We talk about ocean acidification, which is a problem that is not going away. The plight of the American freshwater mussels along the Mississippi River Basin that have been disappearing very steadily. Water quality in Southwest Florida with the water discharges and all that was to be part of that exhibit. Harmful algal blooms, the blue-green algae and red tides, and their effect on mollusks. And some of the species of mollusks that we know have been affected by red tide and blue algal blooms, including cormorants and shark eyes and all. And then to end with a positive note, we have a section that we titled Hopes for Mollusks that where we show some efforts that are going on globally to mitigate some of the problems that malls suffer. Some areas where aquaculture has been very successful. Foster the $1 billion project in Sweden. So with that, I want to thank all of you for being, supportive of this project, and Per Beckman, one of the major sponsors. And most of all, thank you. I just want to say a couple of words about our executive director, Sam Ankerson, who really held the whole thing together, after the storm and everything, and who made it possible by, the great leader. Any questions? Yes. Yes, we do have the models in medicine, but I didn't see this. I didn't want to speak for an hour and a half. So in a nutshell, you need to go and see it. Yes, yeah. Libby had asked about how about the old exhibit that we had, models in medicine. We have a very more contemporary version of that, and I didn't show it here today because it's basically because of time limitation. But yeah, it's there. Another question? Yes. Well, the damage that happened in the Great, well, the question was, is there or are there any provisions to try to mitigate the eventuality of another storm? There are several angles to that question. In relation to exhibits, we have a new roof that's much more, you know, well, it's after Charlie Cole. It's a much more it's a much stronger roof than the one we had before. So hopefully we don't have to go through that again. Also, on the ground floor, we have panels, flood panels that are completely different from the flood panels we had before. They're much taller, and they were put to test during Hurricane Milton, where we had about, I think, 2 feet of water outside the museum. I can't remember, and we had barely had like 3/4 of an inch inside. So the water is really contained now. No, if you have a storm surge at 15 feet, no, it's all gone, but hopefully it won't happen. No, yes. Yeah, she's asking about the living gallery, the aquariums. Yeah, the aquariums were open we reopened the aquariums in 2024 with area of the museum that was renovated, and that was the area that suffered the most. We had 5.5 feet of water because of the storm surge in our area of central Sanibel, and everything was destroyed. And it was our director took too hard to renovate that area first and foremost, so we could have the public something we could have something to show. And before we reopened, after we reopened the aquariums, but before we reopened the Great Hall Shelf, we were charging half the price of each. So yes, we brought it all back together. We already had a giant Pacific octopus that lived a full life. They don't last too long. Naturally, their lifespan is between 3 and 5. We had one there for about 10 days. That's the way prior to and now we're waiting for another day. So we have a giant Pacific octopus week or so. Yeah, I can show you. I can. Any other questions? Yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I like shells. It can help. Thank you.
Barb, do we have any questions for online?
No, we don't, but we all say thank you for a great presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So much. Thank you.